Sir, first class isn't for people like you. Step aside before I get someone to remove you. The words didn't slip out. They were delivered with crisp authority by Emily Parker, a Skypulse flight attendant in her mid-20s, standing in the center of the cabin like she owned the air itself. She held Marcus Bennett's boarding pass between two fingers as if it were trash, and then, without hesitation, tore it clean down the middle. The sound of paper ripping echoed louder than the engines outside. She smiled. Not politely, not nervously. She smiled the way people do when they think no one will challenge them. And in that instant, the cabin went silent. Before we begin this story, have you ever been told you didn't belong and chose quiet strength over anger? Then this story is yours. Watch what happens when power doesn't scream. It acts. And tell us, where are you watching from? Marcus didn't react right away. He didn't look down at the torn boarding pass. He didn't glance around for help. He stood in front of seat 2A, expression steady, eyes calm, his gray blazer immaculate even under the harsh cabin lights. "My name is Marcus Bennett," he said evenly. "Platinum ticket? Seat 2A. Scanned and issued." His voice didn't waver, but Emily was already tapping on her airline-issued tablet, acting out a routine she'd rehearsed in her mind long before he boarded. She turned the screen toward him. "According to this," she said, tapping the red text flashing across the screen, "your seat's been revoked. System flagged it as invalid. You can try economy. If there's room..." In seat 2B, Catherine Hayes, a hedge fund manager in her 50s, decked out in diamond studs and entitlement, leaned forward, removing her sunglasses with deliberate slowness. "I'll take 2A, she said, flashing a manicured smile. "I'm in 4A, but if he's been downgraded, I'm happy to upgrade, let's say, 200,000 in Skypulse shares for the switch." She didn't look at Marcus as she said it. She looked at Emily, like they were sharing a joke at his expense. That should help smooth things over. Several rows back, Tyler Brooks raised his phone. "Did she just say that?" he whispered to no one. To everyone. His followers were already watching. "Yo, this is some real next-level discrimination." Across the aisle, Mia Collins, a consumer rights advocate known for live-streaming airline misconduct, began broadcasting. She didn't speak yet. She didn't have to. The image was clear. A black man, calm and composed, being denied a seat he paid for, while a white woman tried to buy it out from under him. It didn't need narration. A few rows behind them, a boy's voice broke through the tension. "Daddy, why is she picking on him?" 9-year-old Noah Davis clutched his iPad, wide-eyed, his father Michael frozen in quiet fury beside him. Michael didn't answer, but he knew the answer. Marcus didn't argue. He simply repeated, "I was confirmed for 2A. Emily didn't even bother responding. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, turning toward the cabin, "we're experiencing a brief delay due to a ticketing discrepancy. Please remain seated while we resolve the issue. This should only take a moment." She glanced back at Marcus as if daring him to raise his voice. He didn't. In seat 4D, Rachel Turner, his assistant, poised and unreadable, was already typing on her phone. She didn't look at him, didn't speak aloud. She simply tapped, "Protocol Skypulse initiated, 7 minutes counting, confirming internal escalation." In 5A, Olivia Reed, Skypulse's own ethics officer, traveling quietly under an internal review directive, received Rachel's alert and opened her secure memo draft. Her fingers began logging, boarding pass torn deliberately, passenger misidentified, no verification attempt, live footage in progress. She flagged the behavior for direct review by the chairman. Subject, Title 6, violation, ATL Gate 3, Flight 739. Emily hadn't finished. Another flight attendant passed with a tray of water bottles. One, unsteady, tipped. A full splash landed on Marcus's jacket, soaking the left side. The attendant gasped. Emily didn't. She watched it happen and said, "Guess it's not your lucky day." Tyler's camera captured it all. The comment, the silence that followed. Mia whispered into her mic, "This is targeted. It's not just one mistake. This is layered." Marcus dabbed his jacket with a cloth he pulled from his inside pocket. His eyes never left Emily. She looked uncomfortable for the first time. Just a flicker of it. But then she doubled down. "You can take it up with corporate," she said, turning away. "We don't make the rules. We just follow them." Rachel sent the next text. Chairman Walsh notified. Legal clearance active. Acquisition prep underway. ETA, under 5 minutes. Marcus tilted his head, eyes flicking to Olivia, then to Rachel, then back to Emily. She didn't notice. She was too busy chatting with Catherine, who was still talking about stock options. From the back of the cabin, Noah's voice came again. "Daddy, she's laughing at him." Michael reached for his son's hand. "Don't worry. Just wait. You're about to learn something school won't teach you." Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. But within minutes, the airline that tried to erase him would belong to him. The seat they said he didn't deserve would become the place where he made the call that would rewrite their future. 7 minutes. That's all he needed. And he was already 5 minutes in. Emily Parker didn't let up. With Marcus still standing calmly beside seat 2A, she turned to the cabin manager and said with conviction, "We may have a security concern here. Passengers refusing reassignment and displaying non-compliant behavior." Her tone had shifted, no longer smug, now procedural, weaponized with code words that trigger consequences. Stephen Grant, the cabin manager, stepped forward without so much as a glance at Marcus and murmured, "Let's have Ethan check back-end status. Fast." From seat 1D, Ethan Myers, a SkyPulse data analyst assigned to technical onboard support, unbuckled his belt and pulled out a sleek airline-issued tablet. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, accessing the live manifest and internal logs. But what should have been a routine verification had a strange rhythm to it. His hands weren't just reviewing, he was altering. From her seat in 4D, Rachel Turner immediately recognized what he was doing. Ethan wasn't confirming Marcus's ticket. He was rewriting the logs in real time. A full override of his verified boarding status was underway, executed on a device no regular passenger could access. She sent a silent message to Olivia Reed in 5A. Data tampering confirmed. Live manipulation? Escalating now? Olivia, SkyPulse's internal ethics officer, already had her report open. What began as a Title VI violation was now shifting into something more dangerous. Documented evidence suppression during a discriminatory incident. She began updating her internal complaint. Tampering observed via in-flight analyst, non-passenger interference, tech authorization overreach, all while the cabin streamed live. Marcus stood motionless as Ethan finalized his adjustment and showed the altered record to Stephen, who nodded and turned toward Emily. "We've flagged him as unverified. Move forward with the report." Emily's smirk returned like a switch had flipped. "Passenger 2A, your presence is unauthorized. You're now being considered a flight risk under FAA Code 121-2580. She spoke loudly, deliberately using phrasing that triggered legal escalation and would echo in passenger minds. "Comply immediately." In 2008, Marcus had stood in the middle of a skyscraper lobby on Park Avenue, facing a similar setup: 3 white executives, 1 forged audit, and a false ethics violation that killed a $90 million real estate deal. No one in the room had spoken louder than him, but all had agreed afterward that he was the problem. He'd walked away, bought the building next door, and turned it into one of the most profitable data centers in Manhattan. The men who rejected him now paid him monthly rent. Now. in this narrow cabin with recycled air and fluorescent lighting. Marcus saw it again. A lie, layered inside a process, disguised as policy. A few seats back, Tyler Brooks was still recording. "He's not a risk," he said loudly. "He hasn't moved. He hasn't raised his voice." In the aisle across from him, Mia Collins had caught the exact moment Ethan altered the manifest. Her stream had already reached 80,000 viewers. "We just watched them change his status live," she whispered. "They're erasing him in front of us." In the back rows, whispers grew louder. Passengers leaned into one another. Some were pulling out their phones. The ones who didn't speak wore the same look, a dawning recognition that something awful was unfolding in plain sight. Noah Davis, still perched in row 6, looked up at his father and asked, "They said he's a risk now? But he's just sitting there." Michael Davis squeezed his son's hand and answered softly, "That's what people say when they want to get rid of someone they can't control." He kept his eyes forward, locked on Marcus. "Just watch." Rachel's phone buzzed. CNN's content acquisition team had picked up both streams and submitted a live usage request. Their editors were already cutting the scene into a segment. Rachel tapped a quick response. Approval granted. Simultaneously, Olivia sent a flagged internal report directly to Chairman Robert Walsh. Her message included video timestamps, employee names, and a single concluding line, "CEO-level intervention advised before full media combustion." 2 minutes later, the cabin monitors flickered without warning. Every seatback screen switched to a live CNN news alert. The headline scrolled in bold across the top. "Black CEO denied first-class seat. Live footage under review." A 2-minute clip began playing on loop. Marcus's boarding pass being torn. Catherine Hayes's stock bribe. The water spill. The tampered tablet. No narration needed. The images told everything. Gasps filled the cabin. Several passengers straightened. A woman in 3B whispered, "That's this flight." Someone in 1C pulled out his phone and said, "That's the guy right there." Emily, realizing what was happening, lunged toward the controls near the front galley. "Shut the Wi-Fi down! Cut the screens!" Ethan scrambled toward a panel on the bulkhead and pressed a sequence of override commands. Nothing changed. Olivia had already initiated an executive-level lockout. The feed would play for 7 uninterrupted minutes. No one, not even the pilot, could stop it now. Then, without a word, Marcus reached into his briefcase and retrieved a second phone. As he unlocked it, Emily stepped forward and slapped it from his hand. It crashed against the carpeted floor, skidding halfway under the seat in front of him. The cabin went dead silent. She stood over him, shaking. "Put that away. You're escalating a federal disruption." Her voice cracked. For the first time since he boarded, she sounded unsure. Rachel stood. "You just struck a passenger," she said, calm but ice cold. "And you did it in full view of 2 cameras, 20 witnesses, and your own company's compliance officer." She turned slightly. "That's aggravated misconduct and grounds for termination, effective immediately." Emily looked to Stephen for help. But Stephen was staring at the screens, watching the feed play his name, Ethan's face, and her actions in crystal-clear footage, in seat 5A. Olivia finally rose and lifted the lanyard around her neck so everyone could see it. "Skypulse Corporate Ethics. I am now assuming authority over this flight's conduct report. Further interference may trigger a full regulatory investigation." Catherine's voice piped up from 2B, now brittle. "Is this a setup?" she asked. "You're all overreacting. This doesn't need to be public." Tyler's voice responded without hesitation. "It is public. It's already out." And then, through the growing noise, Noah Davis shouted from the rear, "He's not doing anything wrong. You're all just scared of him." His voice echoed in a way that didn't sound childish. It sounded true. The kind of truth adults forget how to say out loud. And still, Marcus Bennett hadn't raised his voice. Not once. Emily didn't know what to do anymore. The confident edge that once lined her voice had evaporated, replaced with flickers of panic behind narrowed eyes. She looked around the cabin for support and found none. Even Stephen, who had been quick to back her judgment minutes earlier, had gone quiet. The cabin was no longer on her side. It belonged to the moment, the screens, the silence, and the man she had tried to erase. But humiliation doesn't stop when you realize you've gone too far. Sometimes it doubles back and hits harder, and in that moment. She tried one last play. She bent down, retrieved Marcus's phone off the floor, and placed it on his tray table with a forced smile. "I think we've all had a misunderstanding here," she said, loud enough to be heard. "Let's de-escalate." But it was too late for that. CNN was still broadcasting the footage. The screens above the seats looped the video again, this time intercut with a breaking banner. "Identity confirmed, CEO of Titan Global Holdings." The cabin collectively froze as that line scrolled past. One man leaned forward and whispered, "Wait, that's him? The Marcus Bennett?" Another voice from the back, "He owns half of Silicon Beach." Phones came out again, now not to record, but to Google. Within seconds, the facts were staring every passenger in the face. Net worth, $50 billion, acquisitions, 92, company footprint, global. The man denied a seat wasn't just anyone. He was someone they all knew, just not by face. Not until now. Marcus didn't acknowledge the news. He sat still in his seat, hands resting on the armrests, eyes trained straight ahead like nothing had changed. In his world, nothing had. The only difference was that now. Everyone else could see what he'd been quietly carrying since the first insult. But Emily wasn't done embarrassing herself. She took a step forward and, trying to salvage what little authority she had left, reached for the briefcase he had resting under his seat. "We still need to clear unauthorized belongings," she said without looking him in the eye. Marcus turned his head slowly. "You've been warned once about personal space." His voice wasn't angry. It was deliberate, slow, edged with finality. But she opened the latch anyway, the moment the case opened. A neatly folded briefing document slid out. SkyPulse internal financials, branding proposals, and a signed letter of intent addressed to Titan Global Holdings. Stephen's eyes landed on the letterhead and went wide. Ethan, peering over his shoulder, turned pale. Emily's hand froze mid-air. The document fell to the floor with a quiet thud, but its impact shook the entire front cabin. One of the nearby passengers, an older gentleman in a business suit, stood up halfway and whispered, "Is this guy about to buy the Airline?" He wasn't wrong. Tyler Brooks was still filming. His voice broke the hush like a match strike. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think the man they just humiliated is about to own the plane we're sitting on." Mia turned her camera to Rachel, who had now opened her laptop and was tapping in a secure authentication code. A loading screen blinked to life with a familiar logo, SkyPulse Executive Dashboard, Acquisition Portal. She entered Marcus's credentials, green light, verified. The crowd wasn't breathing anymore. They were watching history on a tray table. At that moment, a napkin flew through the air and landed on Marcus's lap. It wasn't accidental. Catherine Hayes had thrown it, lightly, but intentionally. "Congratulations," she said dryly. "Maybe now you'll get a glass of wine and feel important enough to sit down." Her tone was dripping with sarcasm, but her eyes betrayed the quiver of a woman who realized her mask had cracked. "Or perhaps you'll sue us all for emotional damage." Marcus calmly lifted the napkin, folded it in half, and placed it beside the case without a word. He didn't give her the dignity of a reply, but Olivia did. She turned from her seat, looked Catherine squarely in the face, and said, "You're on video, too. Your offer of stock to displace a seated passenger is unethical and, in this case, illegal under both FAA and Title VI compliance. You'll be hearing from the board." Catherine laughed once, sharply. "I am the board." "No," Rachel said without looking up from her screen. "You were—" The cabin erupted into whispers and camera clicks. Someone gasped audibly. Stephen stepped back, muttering something to Ethan under his breath. Emily retreated to the galley without another word. But it didn't matter anymore. The fire had already spread. The broadcast loop shifted again. CNN was now streaming a side-by-side image. On one side, Marcus seated calmly with a towel across his lap, and on the other, headlines from Sky Pulse's previous Diversity Pledge campaign. A voiceover from the anchor played through the cabin speakers. Sky Pulse Airlines has come under fire today as a video of its flight crew denying a confirmed first-class seat to billionaire CEO Marcus Bennett continues to circulate, with live footage captured by passengers. Questions are now being raised about bias, corporate culture, and accountability. Somewhere in the back of the cabin, a woman began clapping slowly. Others joined. Then the ripple turned into a round of applause, not just for the revelation, but for the restraint, the quiet dignity, the stillness in the face of chaos. Rachel turned to Marcus. "The chairman's en route. He's boarding from the gate." She paused. "He saw everything." Marcus nodded once. "Let him come." Then he leaned back in his seat, crossed one leg over the other, and finally spoke to the room. "We can all breathe now, but no one forgets what just happened." And no one would. The cabin doors were still sealed. The aircraft grounded on the tarmac. But inside the first-class section of Sky Pulse Flight 739, it no longer felt like a plane. It felt like a boardroom, a courtroom, and a broadcast studio all at once. No one dared speak above a whisper. No one moved with confidence except Marcus Bennett. The man who had been humiliated minutes earlier now sat quietly in seat 2A. The very seat they said he couldn't have, his presence commanding not just attention, but judgment. Rachel closed her laptop and handed him a small device, roughly the size of a TV remote. He turned it over in his hand once, then pointed it at the overhead screen, pressed a single button, and waited. The cabin monitors flickered. CNN vanished. In its place, a sharp corporate interface loaded onto the screen, blue and silver, clean, unmistakably internal. A large title filled the center. Titan Global Holdings, Acquisition Bid, Sky Pulse Airlines. Beneath it, one bold number pulsed against the dark screen. $3 billion. Passengers gasped. It wasn't just rumor anymore. It wasn't a bluff. It was public. Live. Documented. Marcus Bennett had just posted a full-scale buyout offer in the middle of the aircraft they told him he didn't belong on. Stephen Grant stood frozen near the galley, his mouth slightly open. Ethan Myers, still gripping his tablet, looked like someone had unplugged his brain. In the row behind Marcus, a woman clutched her pearls and said, "He's doing this from the plane?" And beside her, a man in a business suit just nodded slowly, as if witnessing something sacred. Emily Parker reappeared from the crew bay, her face pale, voice brittle. That's not real. That's not how this works." She pointed toward the screen like it betrayed her. "You can't just buy an airline mid-flight." Marcus turned to her, expression unreadable. "Not mid-flight. We haven't taken off. Which means everything you've done, every word, every act, every instruction, is on record. In a jurisdiction that includes federal aviation, corporate governance, and civil law." His tone didn't change. It didn't rise. He simply listed the facts like a surgeon listing incisions. From somewhere in the back of the cabin, a small voice spoke up, clear and certain. "He's awesome. "Dad," Noah Davis said. "He's like a superhero, but with money?" Michael Davis chuckled softly, shook his head. "Not money, son. Power. The kind people don't see until it's too late." Catherine Hayes shifted in her seat, suddenly aware of how quiet it had gotten around her. She crossed her arms tightly. "This is absurd. A man doesn't just buy an airline because of one flight attendant." Olivia Reed turned to her. "He didn't buy it because of one flight attendant. He bought it because of everything she represents, and because no one stopped her." Catherine tried to fire back, but her voice cracked, for the first time since she boarded. She looked nervous. Stephen stepped forward like a man trying to reclaim control of a collapsing dam. "I'm sure this is all a performance," he said. "A PR stunt. We'll sort this out through proper channels. There's no way a bid of this scale is valid without prior." He stopped talking, because the screens updated again. A second page loaded beneath the $3 billion bid. It was a signed digital letter from SkyPulse chairman Robert Walsh, time-stamped just 2 minutes prior, marked, "Intent to enter emergency negotiation protocol. Executive authorization pending arrival." The cabin screens dimmed slightly, and then a soft chime rang overhead. The intercom buzzed alive, not from the flight crew, but patched in externally. A voice came through, clear, crisp, and unmistakably high-ranking. "This is Robert Walsh, chairman of SkyPulse Airlines. I've reviewed the footage from Flight 739. Mr. Bennett, you have my full attention. I'll be joining you in person shortly." The transmission cut. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the baby 2 rows back stopped crying. Rachel leaned in toward Marcus and whispered, "Security's cleared the terminal. Walsh is 5 gates away. ETA 4 minutes. He wants to meet face-to-face before final transmission." Marcus nodded once. "He'll want a camera crew, too. Make sure Mia stays live." Across the aisle, Mia Collins was already 10 steps ahead, her followers now over 200,000 and climbing. She adjusted her mic and whispered into her feed. "Chairman's coming on board. You're watching history. Real-time accountability at 3,000 feet. Well, 0 feet. But you get the idea." Emily took another shaky step forward. "You're destroying people's jobs for personal revenge." Marcus turned to her slowly. "You destroyed your job the moment you decided I didn't belong. I'm here to make sure you're never in a position to do that again." His voice remained low, his posture unchanged. That, more than anything, terrified her. From the back of the cabin, passengers began to murmur, some in awe, others in shame. A woman said, "He never yelled. Not once," another replied. "He didn't have to. They did the yelling for him." And then a third, from near the emergency exit. "This is what power looks like when it remembers where it came from." Olivia rose from her seat and addressed the cabin formally. "Until Chairman Walsh arrives, I am assuming control of all SkyPulse employee actions on this aircraft under the company's ethics emergency clause. All cabin staff will remain at their stations. No further contact with Mr. Bennett is permitted unless authorized." Stephen nodded slowly. Emily said nothing. Ethan put down his tablet, and still. Marcus remained seated. He didn't move, didn't gloat. He simply waited, in full view, in full control. The seat they said wasn't his was now the epicenter of a $3 billion reversal. And the cabin braced itself for impact. The cabin felt like it was holding its breath. Every screen still displayed the $3 billion bid, but now the silence had turned sharp, as if the very air knew something irreversible had begun. The low hum of the APU was the only sound as footsteps approached from beyond the curtain. Then it parted. 2 men stepped into the first-class cabin. One wore a navy overcoat and an expression carved from stone. The other, in a charcoal gray suit with a SkyPulse pin, whispered something before stepping back. The man who remained, the one with the storm in his eyes, was Robert Walsh, chairman of SkyPulse Airlines. Every employee in that cabin recognized him instantly. So did Marcus. But Marcus didn't rise. He remained seated, composed, the same way he had been since the beginning. It was the world that had shifted around him. Walsh took 2 slow steps into the cabin, looked at Emily first, then at Stephen, then at Marcus. "Mr. Bennett," he said, voice firm but without bluster. "You have my full attention." Marcus returned the look without flinching. "You had it the moment your staff tore my ticket in half. You're just now realizing it." Walsh gave a shallow nod, acknowledging more than guilt. He was acknowledging defeat, even if he couldn't yet say the words. "I've seen the footage. I've reviewed internal systems. I came here to see for myself what cannot be denied on screen." He turned to Stephen. "You are relieved, effective immediately." Then to Ethan. "You've been recorded committing system sabotage. Turn over your device." Ethan fumbled with his tablet, then handed it to the chairman's aide, who placed it into a black pouch and sealed it. And then Walsh looked at Emily. She tried to hold his gaze but failed. Her lip twitched. "Chairman, I acted based on flight data and passenger compliance." He cut her off without raising his voice. "You acted on bias. You tore up a platinum boarding pass based on how a man looked. You called him a threat without cause. You physically struck a passenger, and you did it on a flight that was grounded, meaning every word you spoke falls under corporate review, not FAA shield." She opened her mouth again, but he held up a hand. "You are terminated. Now." Emily staggered back a step. "But now," he repeated. She glanced at Marcus like she wanted him to say something, but he didn't. He didn't owe her anything. The silence was her answer. Catherine Hayes shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her arms were still crossed, but the confidence was gone. She started to speak, but Walsh cut her off as well. "Ms. Hayes, your conduct is under review. Your offer of stock in exchange for displacing a confirmed black passenger violates multiple ethical policies. Consider yourself suspended from board access until further notice." Catherine's face froze in disbelief. "I am a primary shareholder," she whispered. "You were," Rachel said behind Marcus, "until the board vote passed 30 seconds ago." She tapped a final confirmation on her phone. "It's done." Walsh turned back to Marcus. "Your offer is accepted, contingent on legal review. SkyPulse will enter transition under Titan Global Holdings as of midnight Eastern Time." The cabin collectively exhaled, not in shock, but in recognition that the impossible had just happened. A man they tried to erase had just bought the entire sky beneath them. Marcus finally stood, slowly, deliberately. He buttoned his blazer and looked around the cabin, not just at those who wronged him, but at those who watched. "I wasn't going to say anything," he said. "I didn't need to. I've sat through enough meetings where silence said more than shouting ever could. But let's be clear. This wasn't about a seat. This wasn't about comfort. This was about what happens when someone in power decides who belongs, and what happens when they're wrong." He turned to Olivia. "How many reports like this have gone unanswered?" Olivia answered quietly. "Hundreds. Maybe thousands." Marcus nodded. "Not anymore." He looked down at Emily one last time, who now stood with her badge removed and her arms trembling. "You said first class wasn't for people like me? But the truth is, this airline isn't for people like you." From the back, Noah clapped again, louder this time. The sound cut through the tension, like light cracking through storm clouds. One passenger joined, then another. A ripple turned into a round of applause. And then, from the very seat they denied him, Marcus said what no one else could. "As of this moment, SkyPulse belongs to me, and we're going to build an airline where nobody ever has to prove they belong." Tyler Brooks lifted his camera. "You heard it live. Folks, Marcus Bennett just bought the company mid-flight. No lawsuits, no protests, just power, wielded right. Rachel stepped forward. Chairman Walsh, I'll coordinate with your transition team. He nodded. We'll make it smooth. But this... He looked around the cabin, at the passengers, at the crew. This will never happen again. Then he turned to Marcus one last time. You didn't just buy Skypulse. You made it honest. Marcus looked around one final time, then sat down, calm, resolved. The seat he paid for was his again, but this time, it came with a company and a legacy. The doors to the aircraft remained closed, but inside, everything had changed. The tension that had once suffocated the first-class cabin had lifted like storm clouds clearing after a downpour. Emily was gone, escorted out quietly by ground staff without ceremony or apology. Stephen and Ethan had followed minutes later, their uniforms stripped of authority, their reputations already shredded by the footage circulating across every major network. The name Marcus Bennett trended on every social media platform, not just as a headline but as a symbol of quiet defiance, strategic power, and public reckoning. Marcus sat once more in 2A, the seat they told him he didn't belong in. But now, no one could look at that seat the same way. It wasn't just leather and legroom anymore. It was the command center of a billion-dollar reversal, a place where humiliation had been transmuted into history. Olivia remained nearby, reviewing ethics logs and regulatory handoffs, while Rachel coordinated real-time documents with Skypulse Legal. Walsh had returned to the gate, but not before shaking Marcus's hand and saying, without microphones or cameras, "Thank you for making this real." No one said what they both understood, that no internal audit, no HR email, no diversity campaign could have exposed the rot quite like what had unfolded in these last minutes. The passengers had grown more vocal now, not in protest, but in gratitude. One woman approached Marcus quietly and said, "I used to think staying silent made me polite. Now I see it just made me complicit." Another handed him a note scribbled on a cocktail napkin. It read, "You didn't just save your seat. You saved ours too." Even those who had said nothing, those who looked away while Emily tore the pass, now nodded to him in acknowledgement, in apology, in respect. Tyler Brooks was still streaming. His phone had become an unintentional news channel, and his audience had passed the 2 million mark. Mia Collins remained beside him, coordinating with her advocacy network to ensure Skypulse couldn't sweep this moment away with press releases or performative reforms. "This," she said to her followers, "is what justice looks like when it's backed by resources. But we shouldn't need a billionaire in the seat for the system to care." Marcus listened. He heard every word, and when he finally spoke, he didn't direct his voice to the cabin crew or even to the cameras. He addressed the passengers, the witnesses. "This shouldn't require cameras," he said. "It shouldn't require money. You shouldn't need to own something to be treated with dignity inside it." His words weren't loud, but every syllable landed. "Skypulse will change, not just because I said so, but because you saw it, you felt it, and you'll never forget it." Rachel leaned down and whispered something into his ear. He nodded. Then he stood, took a slim tablet from his briefcase, and tapped into a secure portal. The screens above flickered again, this time not with CNN or legal documents, but a new logo, Air Equity. It shimmered across the cabin in bold silver type. Beneath it, a tagline appeared, "The future of fair skies." Marcus looked up. "This is what comes next." He said, "Air Equity isn't just a system. It's a global AI-powered platform that monitors, records, and verifies passenger treatment, crew behavior, and corporate accountability across every airline, not just Skypulse, It flags bias, it reports misconduct in real time, and it protects people before stories like mine need to be told. There was a beat of stunned silence, then applause, not the polite kind, but full-bodied, real. Even those who had been skeptical now saw the scope of what was unfolding. Marcus wasn't just reacting, he was rebuilding, restructuring, reforming from the inside out. Noah Davis turned to his father, eyes wide. "Dad, that means nobody will get pushed out again, right?" Michael nodded. "That's what it means. Son, that's exactly what it means." Tyler looked directly into his camera. "This isn't just a win for Marcus Bennett. This is a win for every person who's ever been told, 'You don't belong here.' Now there's something watching, something that remembers." Mia smiled and added, "Airlines have customer service numbers. Now they'll have consequences." Marcus remained standing a moment longer, letting the gravity of the announcement settle over the cabin like calm after a quake. "We're not just buying back power. We're putting it in the hands of people who never had it. Every flight, every gate, every crew. This is the new altitude of accountability." He returned to his seat. There was no fanfare, no music, just clarity, and the weight of something irreversible. The aircraft never left the ground that day, but everyone on board knew they'd been somewhere, not just across a tarmac, but across a line, between how things used to work and how they could. When Marcus Bennett stood and claimed ownership of the airline that tried to strip him of his seat, he didn't just correct a mistake. He altered the blueprint of accountability in a space that too often rewarded silence and overlooked dignity, but even power, once exercised, demands what comes next. And Marcus knew that real change only begins when punishment ends. Emily Parker was escorted from the aircraft without a word. Her termination became instant and total, within hours. Her name trended alongside footage of her tearing Marcus's boarding pass and slapping his phone to the floor. Old complaints resurfaced. Former colleagues spoke up. News outlets ran exposés with titles like "The Face of Bias in Blue" and "How One Flight Attendant Brought Down a Fleet." It wasn't revenge. It was exposure. And this time, no uniform could protect her from the truth she thought no one would challenge. Catherine Hayes resigned under pressure 2 days later. Her bribe, captured in HD and broadcast globally, triggered an ethics review across multiple boards where she held positions. Investors pulled out. Her own fund's value dropped overnight. Her smirk in seat 2B would be replayed as a cautionary image of arrogance masquerading as class. She issued a statement. It was too late. Ethan Myers, the analyst who altered Marcus's records mid-flight, was permanently banned from working in aviation data security. His actions weren't seen as personal. They were procedural, systemic, and symbolic of a deeper flaw. FAA regulators launched a full investigation, but Marcus never named him. He didn't have to. The world already had. Stephen Grant disappeared without ceremony. No one asked where he went. No one needed to. But Marcus never gloated. He didn't call press conferences. He declined interviews. His power had been used in public. His legacy would be handled in private. A week later, a new initiative appeared on Titan Global's official website, the Sky Equity Fund. Seeded with $150 million and a mission to support victims of transportation discrimination across the country, the fund covered legal fees, launched independent investigations, and partnered with aviation schools to train future flight crews in cultural literacy and bias prevention. It was justice, not in courtrooms, but in classrooms, terminals, and training halls. Shortly after, another tool went live, Flight Hope, a mobile app built in 72 hours by Marcus's engineering division. It allowed passengers to anonymously report mistreatment mid-flight, auto-forwarding incidents to third-party review boards, regulators, and, when needed, the public. Within its first week, The app recorded over 8,000 verified reports. The sky was no longer silent. It was listening. Inside a quiet auditorium in Chicago, Noah Davis stood in front of his fifth-grade class and presented a slideshow titled, "What Happened on My Flight?" His final slide was a photo of Marcus, seated in 2A, calm, quiet, in control. Below it, his caption read, "He didn't fight back. He built forward." His teacher stood at the back, wiping her eyes. Marcus never said whether the ordeal changed him. Those close to him said he returned to work the next day like nothing happened. But his staff noticed the small changes. An ethics liaison added to his travel team. A new clause inserted in his contracts requiring all partners to review Title VI compliance. Quiet shifts. Permanent ones. The kind you don't need to post about to know they're working. He never asked for recognition. He only ever wanted something better. And though the world tried to deny him a seat, Marcus didn't just sit down. He rebuilt the aircraft around it. At the heart of it all remained a man in 2A, seated, calm, unmoved, not waiting to be respected, just proving, with every breath, that he always belonged. If this story spoke to you, don't let it end here. Like, share, and subscribe, because voices like this deserve to be heard, and change begins when we choose to see.